Welcome to Mystical Messages. I am Hilary Harley, your podcast host. I am a soul guide and astrologer. Mystical Messages is your podcast gateway to discover and learn about the realm beyond the veil, including all things intuitive, metaphysical, and the healing arts. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hilaryharley.com. If you would like to read my monthly forecast, you may find the full written transcript for all astrology episodes on my website. That way, if you hear something and want to re-listen to a forecast or to check a date of a cosmic event, you may find it all on the written monthly forecast on hilaryharley.com. Today, I am so delighted to have my very special guest, Shari Elman, join me to understand more about her work as an intuitive and life coach. Welcome, Shari. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Hilary. This is great. I'm really excited.
Yeah. So I have become familiar with your work, and you have an amazing website. And before I get too far into the show, I just want to share that, like to share guests' websites throughout, so people can find you. So it's Shari, Shari Elman, Elman, all one word, ShariElman.com. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So tell us just a little bit about yourself, your background, and what led you to your healing offering as an intuitive life coach.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I've had this gift since I was a little girl. So I used to talk to animals, and my mom was very supportive. I believe that she had the gift as well, as did my grandmother. And but your childhood shapes so much of what you believe about yourself. And I had a childhood where I had issues with bullying and all of that. So for me, I always felt like hide yourself, hide what you can do, hide yourself because you'll be made fun of. So it wasn't until 2017 when I was at a friend's house on the East Coast with a bunch of women that she pulled me off to the side because I was sort of doing sessions with people without realizing that's what I was doing. And she said, "Why aren't you doing this for a living?" And, it was the first time, it was the right time to hear that, because all of a sudden I heard guides saying, "Yeah, we've been asking you this question for years." "And why have you been avoiding us?" And I started laughing, and I said, now's the time. So in 2017, I was no longer working. And by the way, when I tell you that my career choices were always in service of people, because that is part of who I am.
Right.
But they were choices that were always very, very establishment. I ran for a political office. I was working in government. I was working in, PR. Everything I did, you could hang your shingle and look like a professional and not a crazy person, which was what I kept thinking would happen if I did what I really am good at and what my gift is in, which is this work. I always saw, I was like, oh yeah, then people will look at me as some fortune teller with a crystal ball and a neon sign. And not that there's anything wrong with that. For the people that do that, I get it and it's fine, but that doesn't resonate with me.
Right.
Yeah. So at that point, I just decided, okay, let's give it a shot. And I had a woman who actually said to me, she said, when you hang a shingle, she said, you've got a line of souls waiting for you to just hang that shingle.
Wow.
And I'm getting chills right now. I got chills then. And all I did to hang the shingle was get some business cards, figure out my logo, which, by the way, was a doodle I used to do in classes when I was bored. I used to make the same doodle over and over, page after page in my notebook, and I never knew what it was or why. And then it hit me when I was looking for my logo. It was like, oh my God, this is your logo. So I used that. And and I felt the guidance on that. And then it just all fell into place. I did the business card and I had somebody help design a website. Mm-hmm. And then here we are, it's all been word of mouth. I have not done any advertising, no marketing, nothing. It has all been, my business up till now has all been word of mouth, which I can't tell you how much gratitude I have for that. And it's gratifying to know that the people who have worked with me do pass me on to people that they want to give me, because that's, a huge compliment, and it always feels so soul fulfilling for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tremendous, it really speaks to the work that you're doing when you're able to grow a business by having the virtual shingle of the website, but it's predominantly word of mouth. I mean, that's very powerful. So how do you express and work with clients in terms of your practice? I mean, are there a number of different offerings that you have?
Yeah. So, well, the first thing is, I tap into people's energy. That's the first step. So if, when somebody comes to me, so for instance, let's say a client of mine sends somebody to me, my first step with them will be to, explain what I do, talk about the guides that come in and talk to me. And so I think the offerings really are, one-on-one coaching. That's what I do. And you can do a half hour, you can do an hour, you can buy a package. It's all on my website. I also have done for people who are going through something right now and want the one-on-one coaching, but they want to do it in a very immersive way. I've actually gone to places in Philadelphia, DC, New York, California, and Colorado, where I will actually stay with somebody for a few days, and we will do things together. So I see what they're doing, and we really tap in. And then whenever they start to make the choices that are blocking them or blocking their law of attraction or making their law of attraction show them where they are, I'm able to catch it right in the moment and say, see, this is what I'm talking about, or this is how it's working, or whatever. And that's been really helpful for people who are in like very heavy trauma places.
Right.
So that's been great, but mostly it's a one-on-one. I have been doing also group events where it'll be 5 to 25 women or men. There's men involved too.
Sometimes.
And they'll be in, right, exactly. You'll have one or two, right? So, but they'll, where they will be in a group, and I will do a group with everybody. And my first question is always, are you all comfortable with hearing the truth about what's going on with you in front of a group? Because if you're not, book a private session with me, because I won't go in. Like I've had clients who, I've gone and done a group event, and then all of a sudden I'm hearing things and I'm like, oh, I think that they're gay, or I think that they're this or that or whatever. And I'm not outing somebody. I mean, I don't know who knows and who their friends are and how they feel. So I've had situations where I've actually just held back. And then it was funny. I had one situation where the whole group sort of looked at me and they all went, we know, like, oh, okay. So then I can talk freely. But, you don't want to do that if you don't know, because it's not my job to, to harm somebody or scare somebody or put somebody in a situation they don't want to be in.
Right.
So I'm very cognizant of that. And my guides, and usually the person's guides, are very strong. They'll let me know, like, don't say anything, or this isn't, just hold back a little or whatever. Sometimes people aren't ready to hear the whole truth. So you have to parse it out. which guidance will always tell me, like, because I'm pretty straightforward. If you do a session with me, I don't pull any punches. I don't, sugarcoat anything. I will tell you exactly what I'm hearing from guidance. And I'll tell you exactly if you're getting in your own way, where you're getting in your own way, how you're getting in your own way. And I call it, and I work with my clients with this all the time. I'm like, it's like you went to the mall, right? And you walk in the mall and there's a directory and it says you are here. That's your guidance, right? You are here. That's law of attraction. This is where you are. This is where your energy is. If you want to be at Saks Fifth Avenue, but you're standing in front of, let's say, J.C. Penney's and you don't want to be there, you got to follow the path. And the sign says you are here, follow this path. It doesn't mean you can't walk into Anthropologie or whatever, Brooks Brothers, but it just says, here is where you are. And it also doesn't say we're judging you for where you are. It doesn't say you're a horrible person, that's why you're here, or you're doing this wrong or that wrong. It doesn't say that. It just says you are here. And because your energy is in this place, the flow that you are having is law of attraction, is showing you what you believe about yourself and where you're at in your life. And the minute that you can start to change that and raise your vibration, that's when it all starts to fall into place. Law of attraction, what you see coming into your life, those little arrows, those little messages start to become more positive or lead you to where where you might need to be or where guidance wants you to be. But there's no judgment. That's the one thing, like, I always feel like people feel so judged everywhere in their life, whether it's on this plane or on the other side. Everybody feels like you're being watched and you're being judged. And for somebody like me, who came from a belief system that told me that as a kid, I was like, you know what? No more. I don't need to believe that, because the truth is, on the other side, it's unconditional love. That's what it is. Whatever anybody wants to believe, you can believe what you want. But on the other side, we are all here to learn lessons. This is Earth School, and it's a tough place, man. But we get through it together, and we do this work. And on the other side, they're rooting for us. They're not trying to hurt us or do, negative things. I mean, that's just not, it's not a place of judgment. And that's not the experience I've had when I've connected with guidance.
Yeah, that, you've touched on a couple things that are so important. And one of the reasons I started this podcast was because I wanted a forum for people who are budding light workers or way showers, helpers, basically, helpers and healers, to know that it's okay. And so much of what we encounter with our clients is exactly what you're talking about. Like, is it okay? And as healing practitioners, we've had to cross that Rubicon of what will people think of me? I mean, I am tickled by your description of hanging the neon sign out. I am a fortune teller, because when I just recently, about 3 years ago, I moved to a new neighborhood and I'm introducing myself, and I'm, what do you do for work? Said, I'm an astrologer. And there's this pause. People don't, know how to react. And so one of my very good friends, who's a neighbor, said, yeah, she calls me the fortune teller. She refers to me as the fortune teller. And it's hilarious because I think the younger generations are really so far ahead of us in terms of their embrace of all roads lead to Rome, and the goal and the destination is love and self-love. And anything that it feels positive and yummy that can get you there is what really matters. It doesn't matter if it's, traditional organized religion, or if it's going to a psychotherapist, or working with somebody like you as an intuitive life coach. So you said you started in 2017, I believe.
That's when I hung the shingle. Yeah.
Okay. And so how did you fare during the pandemic? Because I know a lot of practitioners saw a boom in their practices. I certainly did during the pandemic because people are like, WTF, where do I go from here? So you obviously started it 2 or 3 years before the pandemic. I mean, how did that factor into your practice developing?
Yeah, I think business, it probably got a little bit, stronger. More people were contacting me. However, I really feel like during the pandemic, it was people that were already seeing me or talking to me, because most of my clients are not, I'm in the Chicagoland area, and most of my clients are not in this area. They're actually on the East Coast. And you couldn't get to each other. Not that we were going to, but it was a lot of Zoom and a lot of phone calls. And I felt like people just needed a touchstone. They just needed somebody to say, hey, we're going to be okay. We're going to come out of the other side of this, and we're going to be okay. And, there's a reason why things happen the way they happen, even if we can't understand them on this side of the veil. I look at the world, and sometimes I seriously, and I do this for a living, and I know that it's unconditional love on the other side, but sometimes I sit back in awe of the horrors you see sometimes in the world, and you think, and the pandemic was one of them. I mean, so many people, left us during that time.
Right.
I knew that they were heading to a place that they were okay, but that doesn't mean that the living don't miss them, don't, have these feelings. And so I think that for me, it was more of people that were already seeing me were coming to me to say, hey, what's going to happen? Are we going to be okay? Are we going to, is this the end of the world? What's happening?
Right.
And, so there's been a lot of that. And it's interesting because it feels like we are definitely in a period in our history where a new earth is definitely being formed right now. Eckhart Tolle talks about that, right? And there's no joke. It is like, that is where we are. And we can see it in so many areas of life at this point. And I always say, we bring the light. So if we're here on this planet, it's our job to bring light to any situation, to try and bring our, channel the light. Obviously, we don't necessarily carry that much light within us, but light is abundant. It's energy. Energy is abundant. It's in everything. It's in this camera. It's in this, like where I'm sitting. That's a lower frequency. So it moves slower. Higher frequency, it's invisible, but it's light, and it's coming in, and we can channel it. And for all of us, I feel like all these light workers are getting called up now. And that is a new thing. We haven't seen that before, but there's so many people now that are really building that spiritual bridge, if you will. And it doesn't feel like it's through religion necessarily. It feels like a spirit coming, and just an influx of that in people who are surprised by it. I even have clients who have come to me and said, well, I'm getting these thoughts or dreams or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, you're being called up, because I can see their energy. So I know what they are. And I try to tell them, and they don't know, and they aren't necessarily resonating with that yet. And then all of a sudden something happens, and boom, they're like, wait, what is that? And then they come and they're like, what is that? And then I help them to work on it, understand it, and not be afraid of it.
Yeah. And navigate it for sure.
Yep.
That's a really great point, because this is a momentous time of shifting, and it's all about divine timing. And one of the things I work with my clients is saying, you're not missing the boat. You're on schedule. Our earthly time is pretty irrelevant according to divine timing. I mean, you're going to get there. You're going to do the thing. You have to do it in your own way, your own pace. One of the things I want to talk about is your guides. So have you always known your guides since you were little, or were they introduced to you? Did they become clear to you at some point?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. When I was little, I always connected to animals, even like bees, like I would be outside and bees would come around me. And, your first instinct is to be afraid that they're going to sting you or whatever. But I always felt like I should talk to them, which was interesting because they never did sting me unless I did something stupid, like put my arm on a lawn chair, which then he stung me because he was like, "Excuse me, get off of me." So, I get that. But, and it wasn't like a horrible sting. It was just like a, "Hello, go, get off,"
Right.
But anyway, the time, I went through a major surgery and I almost died. I lost all my blood. And I remember that's when I would say my guide came in, and I remember talking to them. I was sitting above my body. I was looking down at myself on a surgical table, and people around me, that were under me, they were like very focused and very concentrated. I was 20 years old, and you could tell they were serious. They weren't talking. There was no music. They were just like working. But for me, I felt nothing. I just felt peace, and I was sitting above myself, and somebody was sitting next to me. I feel like I want to say he looked like Father Time, but I don't know if that's really, that could be my vision of it.
Right.
Like the images we have in our head of what that looks like. But I remember we were talking like telepathically, and I remember him saying, you have a choice right now. You can stay or you can go. And I flashed to the waiting room, and my mom was in the waiting room, and she was hysterical because they had just told her that they didn't know what was going to happen. And my mom and I were best friends. So it was, when I saw that, I immediately bounced back to where he was. And I was like, I can't go. I can't leave my mom. Mm-hmm. And so he said, okay, it's going to be a very difficult 12-year cycle. I just want to tell you that, but there will be an ending to that. And he was right. It was like 12 years. And it was one thing after another. I had to have 4 more surgeries in that time. Wow. I was engaged. My fiance was killed. I had my mom pass away. My grandmother passed away. Like everybody I was so close to who was my core was gone in that 12-year cycle. And then I was diagnosed with cancer in the end of the 12-year cycle. And then I went through surgery, and then I was diagnosed to be, okay. And everything was okay. And it was all of that happened within that 12-year period.
Wow.
And on the other side of it, I thought, wow, that guide is the guide who has been with me since I was a baby. Mm-hmm. I have had angels come in and out of my life in human form, for sure, where they just pop in, with a message, and you are like, oh my God, in your mind, you're thinking, this person's an angel. Like, who is this? Like, I remember I was on an airplane and I was coming back to Chicago. I was living in LA at the time. I was coming back to Chicago, and I was, going to be having a major surgery, and I was scared to death. And I thought, oh my God, like, I don't even know if I'm going to live through this. I don't know what's going to happen. And I remember there was a man. First of all, they bumped me to first class, which never happens. And wow. I'm now in first class, and there's a man sitting next to me, and he just, like, I had my headphones in, whatever. And then all of a sudden I took my headphones out to go use the ladies' room. And he just looked at me and he said, it's going to be okay. Out of nowhere. I had not talked to this man. I didn't know him. And I got off I thanked him, and we talked for a few minutes. And when I got back to my seat, but when we got off the plane, that was it. Never saw him again. Never heard about him. Never heard of him. He really, truly was just an angel who came in to say, you're going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Wow.
And so I always, and I'm getting chills right now, but I always tell my clients, like, you don't know where those angels are coming from. You don't know why someone came into your life to just give you a message and then go. I always say, like, when somebody wants to hold on to something or someone and they just can't let go, I always say, they're just coming in with a message. They're the messenger. It's like the postman. If he comes to your door and he drops off the mail, you don't kidnap him and bring him inside and tie him up and hold on to your man. That's there with a message. Let him go. He's going to go do his thing, and you got a great message.
That is a great analogy.
It just makes me laugh because it's so true. But yeah, so I've had guides. I know I have a muse, female. And by the way, they're not male or female. It's just how we perceive them. Right, but right. I feel like that guide who's with me all the time feels like a male energy. The female guide is more of my creative side, my muse, and comes in and out. And I think I have other guides who come in and out, but I'm not as familiar with them. Because we all do, it's certain times in our life, but we usually have one guide who came in with us at our birth. And the other thing I've learned from my guides is they never incarnated. So your guides, people who've been your family or your ancestors who come in with messages or love or whatever, they can guide you in some ways, but they're not your guides. Your guides have never incarnated in the earthly plane. So they're always on the other side, which is why they stay in unconditional love. So right. One of the things that happens to people a lot is they'll say, oh, I got so angry at this person and I felt like I was having an out of body experience. I just saw red. And then and I always smile and I'm like, yeah, I said, you are having an out of body experience because what happened is your soul just stepped 3 feet away from you and is waiting until you're at a resonating energy that they can come back in because they do not understand our souls are higher self. It's not something that you, it's not our physical body energy, right? So, and from a guidance perspective, I feel like it's the same thing. Your guides do not come in to try and talk to you loudly. They have a very small, soft voice, and they're not going to scream at you. That's your brain. Unless something is happening that they need you to move fast. For instance, you're about to get on an elevator and they're like, do not. And they'll give you a signal that says, go walk somewhere else. Do not get on that elevator. Do not turn that corner. I've had that happen. I was in a different country and I felt like somebody was sort of following us and something about it. I kept hearing my guide saying, duck into a store, go somewhere, do not stay on this street. And we did. And my girlfriend and I, and when I turned around, when I got inside the store and looked out the window, it was somebody who had their hand in their pocket and they just looked so angry that I thought, oh my God, they thought I was an American and maybe they were just going to stab me in the back and keep walking and no one would have known and nobody would have understood what happened. They wouldn't have been caught. I mean, the whole thing was so unbelievable, but my guide was right there, like get in a store, like that was very loud. I heard that, but normally that's not how they communicate. They're just very quiet, soft. They're trying to guide you, but they're not going to free will. They're not going to tell you what to do.
Right. Yes. Each of us does have free will. My guest is Shari Elman. Her website is sharielman.com, SHARIELMAN, sharielman.com. And she is an incredible intuitive life coach. And we are talking about how she works with her team of light to guide her clients for their best and highest good. And one of the things you touched upon just now, early in my training, was that the soul is eternal. The personality is the unit of incarnation, meaning that, when I look at a natal birth chart, that's the personality profile that has all of the life lessons, the blessings, the challenges inherent in this current lifetime that we're living. But the soul is eternal. And I liked how you mentioned that it's not hovering above, but it is just it's integral to us, but it is neutral and it's contained. It operates from a system of love. Whereas the personality that we have is what struggles with, why did he do that to me?
Right.
Or, why can't I have this or that? And, that's Earth School. We have these lessons that we're here to learn. And that's why some things come so easily. The analogy that I like to use is I'm really great at writing, and that's I've always had like a literate sort of connection, but other people are great at cooking, and I'm very so at cooking, and it's just what comes naturally to you.
Right.
So I just want to talk about what you offer that other practitioners, what distinguishes you and your service that sets you apart in terms of why somebody would come to you as opposed to another life coach? I mean, clearly you're an intuitive energy life coach. But is there anything else that separates you from the pack?
Yeah. So anybody who's an intuitive, they have a gift, right? And I think we all have intuition, and we just use it at different levels. We understand it at different levels. And some of us aren't ready to be, I call it the enlightenment pool. Some people are sitting on the side of the pool, dangling their feet in the water. And some people are in the Indian Ocean, swimming around like no big deal. And it just depends where you are, in which maybe lifetime or whatever. I differentiate, I would say my unique quality, so if somebody was going to go talk to a life coach, not an intuitive life coach,
mm-hmm.
There's something to be said for book learning. It's like a psychiatrist, a psychologist, it's great. I mean, they go through many years of study and they're great in their field, and I have complete respect for them. The difference I feel is I am getting information and messages from something beyond the veil. They know everything. We don't. They know why you're blocking yourself, where it's coming from, what happened. They know all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And they also know how to help you move forward. And I'm channeling that energy. It's not that I know it personally. Like Shari doesn't necessarily know why you block yourself. But when your guides come in and start to work with you through me, they do know. And so there's no book that I've ever read in psychology, let's say, that says that or tells you how to deal with something. It's like people get grouped into big groups. If you have bipolar disorder and you are struggling with that, then there's a set of protocols that your person will tell you, this is what you do. The guides will come in and say, hold on a minute, instead of this, let's talk about this. Instead of that, let's look at this. And I'm not giving examples right now of what those things are, but I'm just saying, that's the example. That's the experience of it. They will come in and they'll cut to the chase. And the one unique thing about me is I am not somebody who's woo-woo, fairies and angels, which I believe in fairies and angels.
Yeah.
I think that's great, but that isn't, I'm more like a computer program. I get a download and then I upload it to you. And the download is from guidance, God, whatever
source.
You want to call it.
Right.
The source. And then it comes through me and out to you. It is, and I try to stay out of the way of it. And I always tell my clients, if something doesn't resonate with you, tell me, because one of the things that happens, so for example, I'll see a field of flowers and I'm like, oh, you like flowers, whatever. And they're like, no. I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden the guides will start clearing the signal and I'll see that it's snowflakes, or I'll see that it's runes, or I'll see that it's sand dollars. And I'll be like, oh, are you heading to the beach? oh my God, I'm heading on a vacation to Tahiti or whatever. And so that's how it works for me. So it's never like when I get in the way of it, and it's not really getting in the way. It's just that, of course, I'm the interpreter of what I'm hearing, seeing, or feeling. So when I'm explaining it to somebody and it's not resonating with them, I'm always like, well, let's clear this up, and then we get there. And usually that's how I think that I work differently than other people in my area. Like I would say that's probably one of the biggest differences is, I'm getting all that information from on high, as I like to call it. And that's very different than one physical body talking to another physical body, one personality talking to another personality. That doesn't get in the way of the work I'm doing. That is just a piece of it, but the real thing is something that is source driven, and it's way beyond what I could possibly know about somebody. I'm also not a fortune teller. I'm not going to sit down and say, oh, use these numbers in the lottery. I don't know what numbers to use in the lottery. If I did, I too would be tons of money in the lottery. But what I can tell you is that when guides come in, it's because they believe you have a message you need. And what is that message? And hopefully Shari can help you because we'll give her what that message is, and then she'll tell you, and hopefully that will resonate with you.
That's an amazingly thorough and detailed explanation. Thank you. One thing that strikes me when you mentioned earlier about this 12-year cycle of struggle, it's been my experience, and I'd be curious to hear what your experience is about this, but a lot of healing practitioners in the healing arts have difficult roads, and not that we all don't have difficult roads in many respects, but it is a reckoning where we have to say, yes, we really want to do this work because we've had to learn and cross so many hurdles and understand ourselves in a much deeper, reflective way than other kinds of practitioners. And so I'd be curious of your thoughts around that.
Yeah, for me, I would say that's absolutely true. If, when I look back at my body of work, or as what some would just say your life, I definitely see, I've had a very meandering path, and I see all the lessons that have come in from the time that I was a little girl that I, at the time was just in pain over because I didn't understand it. And I felt like, why doesn't, in that case, I was like, well, why doesn't God love me? Why doesn't, why are these things happening? You're 6 years old, 7 years old. And, you're just like, why don't I have friends? Or why is this happening? Or why is that happening? But what happened is it shaped what was important in my life. I knew at a very young age that, and my mom was a great gift to me because she was so wise and she gave so much great information, and she definitely was an angel in my life. And she, I always learned from those experiences. And as I got older, I understood that friends were one of the most important things I could cultivate more than anything else. Obviously good health and all that stuff, but for me, friendships became a huge point in my life of, that feels like it's like having angels around you all the time, having the support system around you all the time. And I was able to find that group, that tribe of women and men that I am that close with, that I feel like they are the angels in my life too. They're just the physical embodiment of those angels, but they are, they help keep me on my path. They help keep me, in the direction I'm going. Yeah. And And so I feel like the trials and tribulations we go through are there to teach us, because this is earth school. So when somebody says to me, well, I have, this and that, and it's, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. Cause, I had surgery and I almost died, and I had breast cancer and I almost died, and I had to do this, and I lost my fiance, and I get it. I get why you feel the way you feel. But you know what? Let me put a little perspective on that for you. Let's talk about where you're headed. Let's talk about what you learned from these experiences and where you're growing and where you're going. And where are you in the enlightenment pool? Are you sitting on the side, dangling your feet, or are you going to get in the water and let's go? And I always tell people, it's funny because I get a lot of people who talk about relationships and they're like, well, he did this or she did that. And I'm like, okay. I said, and then you tried to bring them to where you are, because usually they're a little more enlightened in some way. And they're like, yeah, I felt like I was dragging him. And I'm like, I said, so let me ask you a question. If you were sitting on the side of the pool, afraid to swim or get in the water, and somebody suddenly grabbed you and pulled you into 20 feet of water, what's your response going to be? What are you going to do? Are you going to pretend you know how to swim? Are you going to grab onto them and say, take me back to where it's safe? Are you going to force yourself to get back to where it's safe and then never talk to them again because you're scared out of your mind?
Right.
I said, you have to understand everyone has free will. And if they aren't ready to come to 20 feet of water, you cannot drag them there. They will feel like you are trying to kill them. That is not a good relationship. And so, I think when you start to explain it to people in a way, I feel like one of my gifts as well is to take what can be so convoluted when it comes to the other side and bring it into layman's terms so that you can understand what's going on in your life. I've read like Seed of the Soul, Gary Zukav, right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I understand what is happening, and I still cannot make sense of that book sometimes. Like I look at it, I read it, I reread it, I reread it, reread it. And I'm still sitting there going, what does that mean? Like, what is that? And he's a genius. I mean, he really is.
Yeah.
And I get it. I just can't get it. But yet I get it because I'm getting channeled with it. So I will be able to, with my clients, make it so that maybe it's a little more understandable and you can actually do some of the work and start to move yourself in that direction, at least to understand what they're asking of you.
Right.
Where you're at, right?
Well, and that is so what I have come to enjoy about you is you're gifted, yet you're humble and you explain things in real deal, practical language, accessible language and terms. I mean, just some of the analogies that you've used in this conversation today have been incredibly real. The mall, being in a mall, who hasn't done that?
Right.
Where do you want to go? Where are you now? And where do you want to go in that mall? And that is what life really is a buffet of choices. For sure. And the enlightenment pool. I think we can all relate to that. I mean, whether you're into intuitive work or not, it's like there are people that want you in a certain place. It's all about expectations and how you work with those expectations in a relationship. My guest is Shari Elman, intuitive life coach. You can reach her at ShariElman.com. So what is your favorite part of the work that you do?
So as you know, because you did my chart, by the way, amazing. I mean, it really, truly helped give me more enlightenment about some of the things that I've experienced or how I got to where I am that I had no clue. And I sat there going, oh my God, like that so makes sense. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I would say, that's a good question. Can you repeat it?
The most favorite part of your job.
Yeah. I feel like my favorite part is the service. Like I love helping people. And when I I'm a very strong Virgo, and that's why I was getting into that. And Virgo is a service, it's in service to or whatever. And I feel like one of my very favorite things is like having like I've had clients who have been in very precarious situations in their psyche, and they didn't necessarily want to be here anymore, for example. And working with them over the course of time has changed that. And to me, there's nothing more important. There's nothing better than knowing that you have touched somebody else and made a difference in their lives. And that for me, just knowing that somebody is going to have a better day, a better life, a better choice helps me tremendously. And channeling the energy is the second thing I would say. Like, I love when guides come in and start to give me information, and I feel that chill, and I just know that I'm tapping into something and I'm on it. And it's like this feeling that I don't get in very many other places. It's like you're so connected to something bigger than yourself, and something that feels like love. It feels like it's powerful, but it's not power. It's not like, oh, I'm so powerful. It's not like that. It's like power channeling through you, making somebody else powerful, giving them the ability to be powerful in their life, in their choices. Yeah. That there's nothing as wonderful as that. I'm sure you can relate.
Well, pure love is not ornery, loud, bombastic, dominating. It's something a little stronger than soft and snuggly, but it's vibrant, it's colorful, it's rich, it's delicious. It feels strong and in a healthy kind of a strength way. So what would you say the analogy to that, the opposite to that would be, what is the toughest part of your job?
When somebody doesn't get it, sometimes you just have people who aren't ready, and they're not ready, but you're trying anyway. Like, you can feel guides come in and they're just like, good luck with this. I mean, it's just, you're not gonna, this isn't going anywhere. And, in those situations, I always find myself repeating myself over and over. And, I'm surprised when somebody doesn't turn to me and say, okay, stop saying the same thing over and over. But it's from a guidance place, that it's not getting in, it's not getting through, and you're saying it ad nauseum, and you're like, that's it. I have to just pull out, and and be done with this. Mm-hmm. And if somebody's not ready to hear the message, it's really difficult for the person who's channeling the energy for you. But I also feel guides say it's okay. Just, when they're ready, they'll come back. Or if they don't, they'll go somewhere else, and hopefully they will. And that to me is so important. I want people, if they don't use me, I tell my clients this all the time. I don't care if you talk to me. I mean, I love that you're talking to me and I want you to talk to me, but if you choose to go to somebody else, go. I want whatever it is that you need to do to live your best life. That's where I want you. So go do it. Because if they leave, guidance says somebody else will come in and fill the, water always goes to its level, and they will come in and there will be another.
That is a really good analogy. Water always goes to its level. Because as I said earlier, all roads lead to Rome. And that's why there are so many different flavors and varieties of healing assistance. And one is not necessarily better than the other. It's, we're all energy and frequency, as quantum science is certainly proving right now. And what I respond to is different than what you respond to, and our pacing too, and how quickly. And that's where the human judgment really needs to take a back seat, because, I wasn't born to be Michael Jordan. Thank goodness. I was born to be to do this work, and he's great at what he does, and that's awesome. So what is the best way that someone can prepare for a session with you?
Just really, people say, oh, should I have a list of questions or whatever? So what I always say is, if you're going to do an hour with me, you don't have to do anything. Just come and be open to the process and have a conversation with me. Open, tell me what resonates with you, tell me what doesn't. If you choose to do a shorter session, especially for your first session, I always say come with questions, because guidance, they work in their divine timing. And that does not mean that they're going to give you answers to the exact questions that you have if they believe you need to know something else. Mm-hmm. They're not going to talk about why Paul isn't dating you. They're going to talk about why you care that you can't get a date, or what's going on with you and where you're at in your world that is creating the blocks you have, and law of attraction and what's coming in. So sometimes your questions can be very important and help to guide quickly, because we got to get to it quickly, because the time flies by, as you know, and especially when it's like somebody says, I want a half-hour session and I've never talked to them before. I'm like, okay, well then come in with some questions, because to get to it, we gotta go fast. I can't have a general half hour where I'm just talking about what guides want you to know. We don't have time for that. So in that half hour, if you're trying to get to what you need to know, you got to come in armed with what you want to know. But other than that, I would say nobody needs to do anything except be open to the process. Know that you may not hear what you want to hear, but you will hear what will guide you to the next highest place in your life, especially in your choices, because everything we do is about choice. And guidance always tells me there's only two foundations to every choice we make in our life. One is a foundation of fear, and the other one is a foundation of love. When you're coming from the foundation of love, it's, I have faith in something bigger than myself. I know that guides have my back. I know this is going to work out for my highest good and the highest good of all involved. When you're coming from the place of fear, it's, what if this bad thing? What if that bad thing? Oh, negative. Oh, horrible. Oh, my God. And then it immediately is all fear-based. And I always tell my clients, you cannot walk around fear. You have to walk right through the middle of that ring of fire, because it will not allow you to go around it. You got to go through it. And that's a tough one sometimes for people. And that's why there are people who I'm sure do not want to work with me, because I do not sugarcoat it. I'm like, this is the fear place, and you got to walk through the center of it. And I'll help you do it, but you got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, a short version of what you're offering to me sounds like you're doing intensive shadow work. And fear, as I've come to learn, is false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
It is.
That's great.
It's an illusion, but it triggers so much emotion in us that can, ultimately make us feel like we're drowning.
Yep.
And the only way to work with it, as you said, is either to walk through the ring of fire. The analogy I tend to use is that you're swimming with the current rather than swimming against the current, which is going to pull you under. So are there any books, resources, tools, classes, teachers that you have found particularly helpful in your path that you would suggest starting to explore, to use, to look into if they wanted to learn more about tapping into their own guides, following their path?
Yeah, I would say two books that I read, or you could do the tapes, books on tape or whatever. One would be The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I think that is a good entry into some of this work. It tells his story, but I think that anybody can adapt it to their own story. Carolyn Mace, who is, she's tough, and that's one of the things I loved about her. But the thing that really is a place that, or like a work of hers that I did very early on, was Anatomy of
the Spirit.
Energy. Yeah, I think it
the
was
Anatomy of Energy, or the Anatomy of Spirit.
I think I think it was Anatomy of Energy. It was it's about the energy. It wasn't like her first book was Spirit, and I think this was her in this, and I did it as a CD collection.
Okay.
Because I would listen to it as I was falling asleep. I would listen to it in my car. I would listen to it all the time. And I was, it was during the time I was struggling, right, with all of the surgeries and everything that happened to me. And I really needed to start to understand where that was all coming from and what that was all about. And so that was something that I used to help get me through that. And I wish I could think of the name of it, but I can't. So anyway.
Her books, it's for anybody that doesn't know, Carolyn Myss. It's her last name is spelled very differently than it sounds. It's Myss. Carolyn Myss, Myss. And yeah, I've read a couple of her books. Anatomy of the Spirit for me was, that's like a foundational book because it helps you understand why we're here and what we're doing. And basically an intensive version of our conversation today. So if you could change the world in one way to make it better, how would you change it?
I would have every human being on this planet recognize that they are 99% soul and 1% physical body. Because to me, that would change what is happening all around us at so many levels. I mean, when you look around the world right now and you see the horrors and the scary and the whatever, I feel like, yeah, those are people that are not in a body, mind, spirit connection. They are physical body only, and they have no connection to spirit at all. And that is why they can do the things that they're doing. And so for me, that would be the thing I would change immediately, because I think the minute that you realize you're 99% soul, everything changes.
Right. Shari, it's been an absolute joy to have you on this show today. My guest has been and is the amazing, real deal, straight shooter, highly personable too. I mean, you're just a delight. Shari Elman, and her website is sharielman.com. It's SHARI Elman, ELMAN.com. And she is an extraordinary intuitive life coach. That brings us to the end of this episode of Mystical Messages. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hilaryharley.com. If you would like to read my monthly forecast to check dates of planetary events and cycles, you may find the full transcript for all astrology episodes on my website. Thank you so much for joining today and listening. Please come back in 2 weeks when I will be bringing you my astrology forecast for the month ahead. I wish you many blessings as you journey forward.